The interpretation of narratives is to some extent subjective because everyone can experience art differently. At the same time, using literary analysis, we can still explain the most reasonable meanings that the artist meant to convey or that the audience is likely to understand. To understand themes of any work of art, however, spoilers are involved. Heavy spoilers. So consider this your spoiler warning. God of War Ragnarok, developed by Santa Monica Studio, is the sequel to the first Norse-era game God of War, improving on gameplay and continuing the story presented in the 2018 entry. The narrative of the first game contained themes about honoring parents, self-control, telling the truth, and changing for the better, which you can check out in my Biblical Themes video on God of War. Ragnarok also continues those themes, but it introduces a number of new themes in the narrative of the second game, including many related to fatherhood and parenting, which you can check out in part 1 of my Biblical Themes video for God of War Ragnarok. In this video, part 2, we will explore other themes and answer the question, what lessons do Kratos and Atreus have about purpose and fate during Ragnarok? The first lesson that God of War Ragnarok wants the player to consider is whether to embrace or resist fate and prophecy. This is an obvious and prevalent theme due to the nature of Ragnarok itself, an apocalyptic event with numerous prophecies associated with it. Throughout the game, different characters represent different attitudes on whether to embrace or resist fate and prophecy. Odin is someone who attempts to resist fate and prophecies. He does this by discovering all he can about the prophecies. He attempts to prevent different signs of Ragnarok, such as capture Skoll and Hati or attempting to kill all the giants. Odin does all he can to stop Ragnarok and change his fate, including asking Kratos and Atreus for peace. On the other hand, the Jotnar, Angrboda, and her father both embrace fate and prophecy, despite Angrboda's struggles to do so. When it is prophesied that Angrboda's father will die, he embraces this prophecy and accepts it. This angers Angrboda's grandmother, Grilla, who cannot understand why someone would embrace such a prophecy. She even taunts Angrboda about her role in the prophecy, which Angrboda herself struggles with. Kratos and Mimir, however, are shown to be those who resist fate, but cautiously. Though they claim to not put any stock in prophecy, they are actually careful and often seek to acquire information about prophecy. Kratos himself has had numerous past experiences with Greek prophecies, and warns that prophecies are often fulfilled when one attempts to avoid them.
So the Oracle herself brought about the very future she hoped to avoid.
Kratos is rather fatalistic regarding himself and Ragnarok. He does not care if he dies during Ragnarok, and while he doesn't want war, he doesn't really care whether Ragnarok starts or not. However, as a father, when it comes to the survival of Atreus, Kratos is willing to resist fate and prophecy. This includes Kratos seeking out the Norns, the literal embodiments of fate, in order to ask them about how to protect Atreus. When he discovers he must kill Heimdall and possibly cause Ragnarok, Kratos does not care if it means Atreus will survive. While Kratos does not want war or Ragnarok, he will do anything to ensure the survival of Atreus.
If Heimdall must die for Atreus to live, then Heimdall must die.
This includes performing events that are prophesied, such as Atreus shooting an arrow into an eclipse to fulfill the prophecy of Skoll and Hati, which he calls necessary. The Bible also contains stories about resisting prophecy and fate. And he came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. And when he came to the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter into temptation." And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and knelt down and prayed, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." Though Jesus does not wish to be crucified and prays for it not to happen, he submits to God's will and embraces his destiny because it is necessary to save the world. All through God of Ragnarok, we see many characters embrace, struggle, and resist prophecy and fate. However, the Norns suggest that fate is not so much set as difficult to avoid, because people will always live out their natures, implying that if a person's nature could be changed, their fate could be changed as well. This is connected to our second theme. A second lesson that the game wants to teach is about changing a person's nature for the better. This was a theme in the 2018 entry, but the second game deepens and extends this theme by focusing on the idea of changing a person's nature. This theme is especially developed through two different motifs. The first motif is that of nature and form, and how a person or a thing's nature is more important than its form. Brok explains that Dwarven magic is based on this concept.
The nature of a thing's more important than the form of a thing.
This motif of nature and form is then applied to people. Kratos tells Brok to bless Draupnir, because even though his form is incomplete as a blacksmith, he is still by nature a blacksmith. Kratos then applies this idea to himself. He is still in the form of a god of war, but he does not have to live out that destroyer nature.
I taught him all about the nature of the thing and the form of the thing. Become a whole motif.
You're making up words again.
I said it was a motif, and it was beautiful.
This idea that his nature can be changed is captured in the second motif, the repeated phrase, do better or be better. Throughout the game, Kratos and Atreus encourage many people to change their nature for the better, to improve. This is not usually about skills or competency, but changing someone's moral nature for the better. Faye tells Kratos that they need to change their natures for the better for their son, Atreus. Later, when Kratos apologizes to Atreus, Atreus reminds Kratos not just to be sorry, but to be better. Thor thinks of himself as a destroyer, someone who can only destroy realms and peoples and his own family. Kratos challenges Thor to be better. In contrast, Odin is someone who even at the end is unwilling to change his nature. Even after he is defeated by Kratos, Freya, and Atreus, he tells Atreus that he will never stop. The book of Ephesians, too, discusses the importance for Christians to change their nature for the better. Now this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, due to their hardness of heart. They have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. But that is not the way you learned Christ. Assuming that you have heard about him and were taught in him, as the truth is in Jesus, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God, in true righteousness and holiness. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 to 24. Like Christians who change their nature after the likeness of God, Kratos must change his nature for the better, going from the form and nature of a vengeful, violent, destroying God to the nature of a God of justice, leading to our third theme. The third lesson of God of War Ragnarok that Kratos and Atreus want us to learn is that of valuing justice over vengeance. In Ragnarok, there are many characters who want vengeance for various reasons. Thor wants vengeance on Kratos for the deaths of Magni and Modi. Freya wants vengeance on Kratos for the death of Baldur. Even when Kratos manages to reconcile with Freya, she still wants vengeance on Odin instead, for what she feels is the destruction of Vanaheim, their marriage, and eventually their son Baldur. Despite Kratos resisting Ragnarok throughout the game, it is Odin's impulsive murder of Brok that pushes their team down the path of Ragnarok. With everyone in shock and mourning, Sindri and Freya's desires for vengeance seem to lead everyone down the prophesied path. Only Odin seems to defy this desire for vengeance, willing to seek peace with Kratos, despite Kratos having killed his son and 2 grandsons. While this may seem benevolent, this idea of justice or vengeance is intertwined with the motif of sacrifices. The reason that Odin doesn't want vengeance is that if Baldur, Magni, and Modi being sacrificed results in Ragnarok being permanently prevented, Odin would consider that a win. Sif accuses Odin of sacrificing Aesir blood to fix his problems, including Heimdall. Her claim is seemingly proven true when Odin sacrifices even his own son Thor when Thor disobeys him, perhaps worried that Thor would openly come against him. This motif of sacrifices was also applied to Kratos, with Kratos acting like Odin on his path to vengeance. When he accepts the position of General of the 9 Realms rebelling against the Allfather, Kratos admits that it is not a path of justice, but of vengeance. In his rallying speech, Kratos suggests that the willingness to sacrifice is the key to victory, echoing Odin's thoughts as well. Both sides prove willing to go to extraordinary lengths for victory, But it is when Atreus realizes that Odin would sacrifice even innocent Midgardians that his mercy and compassion give Kratos pause. Realizing that his vengeance would make him like Odin, Kratos changes his mind and tells Atreus not to sacrifice his sense of mercy.
But we did not come to sacrifice the innocent.
Instead, they decide to defeat Odin for justice, not vengeance. In the final battle, Kratos, Freya, and Atreus are able to defeat Odin, but not with a violent bloodthirst. Instead, Atreus pleads with Odin to stop, but Odin refuses. Only then does Atreus capture Odin's spirit in a marble. With Odin in this captured form, Kratos lets Freya decide Odin's fate, but even the vengeance that Freya wanted is diminished. While they are trying to decide what is the just way to handle it, Sindri's desire for vengeance consumes him, and he destroys Odin. In the book of Romans, this idea of justice versus vengeance is discussed as well. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans chapter 12, verses 14 to 21. Paul explains how vengeance should be left up to God and that evil should be repaid with good and justice. Even though Odin is not driven by vengeance, others seek to gain their vengeance on him due to his willingness to sacrifice anything to accomplish his purpose. This leads us to the final theme for today's video. The last lesson of God of War Ragnarok that we can learn from Kratos and Atreus is that of finding meaning and purpose in life. Throughout the game, many characters are shown to know their purpose, seek their purpose, or fulfill their purpose in life. The giant Surtur nearly does not fulfill his purpose of destroying Asgard because he does not wish to destroy his love Sinmara. As a result, he does not combine with her, but channels his nature into Kratos' blades of chaos to trigger his transformation. As a young man coming of age, Atreus spends most of the game seeking his purpose, his destiny, as Loki, particularly in what was prophesied of Loki. Eventually, this leads him to Ironwood, where he discovers his purpose is to be the champion of the Jotnar and the keeper of the souls of the giants. While Atreus is initially excited to fulfill this destiny, his encounter with Grilla does not go as he expects, and he puts part of this on hold while he fulfills his role and purpose in Ragnarok. Angerboda's purpose and destiny was to tell Atreus his. When she accomplishes this, she feels empty and uncertain of her purpose in life. This is a struggle for her for the rest of the game until she eventually decides that she can find her own purpose, bringing Fenrir to Asgard to save Kratos and Atreus. Perhaps the greatest example of meaning and purpose is that of Odin. Odin explains to Atreus that life is difficult for gods because they must give mortals purpose and meaning in their lives while not knowing their own. As a result, Odin is driven to seek answers from the rift. He is bent on pursuing this answer, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to obtain the answer of his purpose. When Kratos' forges drop near, Odin accuses Kratos of not understanding what Odin is doing because he doesn't have mortals depending on him. Kratos, though a god, has no mortals worshipping him and has no purpose. In fact, Kratos does not seek war and does not want to accept the role of leading the armies of the Nine Realms against Odin in Ragnarok. In Odin's final moments, he still feels compelled to seek answers from the mask and the rift. In the Bible, we see that Jesus understood his destiny and purpose in the gospel. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" John chapter 18, verses 33 to 38. The Gospel of John reveals that Jesus understood that his purpose was to be a spiritual king and reveal truth to the world. At the end of God of War Ragnarok, we see that like Jesus, both Atreus and Kratos set off to fulfill their purposes in life. Atreus resumes his task of seeking out the Jotnar and being the keeper of their souls, seemingly setting off on a new adventure with Angerboda. As Kratos says goodbye to Atreus, he discovers a painting, one of Kratos being worshipped as a benevolent and just god of war, like Tyr, and decides that this is a path and a purpose that he had never considered but wishes to live out. The narrative of God of War Ragnarok is filled with many universal themes, so many that I had to make 2 videos. In the first video, we discussed themes that are lessons relating to fatherhood and parenting, which you can check out in part 1 of my biblical themes video for Ragnarok. In this video, we discussed how the game uses many characters and motifs to convey themes of fate and prophecy, changing personal nature for the better, justice instead of vengeance, and even the purpose of life. While the themes that are conveyed aren't always perfect, the game does take time to deliver reasonable and nuanced ideas in its themes, which is ultimately what makes the story so satisfying. I really enjoyed making these videos, and if you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed watching them as well. That's all I have for you in this video. Bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If this video blessed you in some way, please consider watching some of my other videos, subscribing, or sharing with me some of your thoughts in the comments below.